Hi guys, today we're going to talk roses. Now many people feel that they're too fussy or too much work, and I have found that many times it's the right rose for the right place. So let's talk about the different types of roses and what situations they do better in. So let's talk roses. So why do rose types matter? Well, there's a lot of different kinds of roses and they're suited for different purposes, different areas. There's even roses that have been bred or hybridized, whatever, to do well in high heat conditions, others for very cold areas and whatnot. Now, many times it's listed on the tag or they even have a name that denotes that, meaning like my sunblaze roses are an example. Many miniature roses really don't do well in hot sun conditions, and the sunblaze do beautifully in very hot conditions, and they're a miniature rose as well. So just knowing those types of things is good. Here, I don't do that great with hybrid tea roses. They don't like our very weird springs where it's warm, freezing cold, warm. Yeah, they many times struggle in that and don't perform well. I have one in my garden that actually, where I have it, must be a good spot or it's an extra tough variety. It's Firefighter. And yeah, that one does seem to do well for me, but it doesn't get big, huge, and big blooms like it would in maybe a more, what do you say, moderate region. When I lived in the valley, I grew hybrid teas. I grew all roses down there, and they all did beautifully, but it's a very moderate climate. You don't have super cold winters. You don't have the weird springs where it goes warm, cold. And this, what I mean is extremes. Yeah, we get some late freezes that really set back many of the roses, but I have roses that will recover very well and then perform very well. So yeah, sometimes finding the right type of rose for your area is the ticket. So I'm going to start with shrub roses. This is a shrub rose from David Austin. Many of their roses are shrub roses, and they grow in naturally rounded forms. They're great for landscape plantings, hedges, low maintenance. For me, they're very low maintenance, and other easy. They're very versatile. And when it comes to pruning, it's very simple. You don't have to do any kind of magical formula. You just whack them back. And yeah, and look how gorgeous. This is Jubilee Celebration, one of my very favorite David Austin roses. Now, if you can't find this on the website of David Austin, there's a couple of places. I think Mountain Home Roses grows them, carries them now, and I don't know. I think there's Kate's Roses, but I'm not sure if they carry them. But so look on those sites if you want one. I would say this is one to add to your garden. So shrub roses, they're bred to be disease resistant, repeat blooming, winter hardy, and easy care. So they're excellent roses for people who want to enjoy having or growing roses but don't want the constant care. So because they have a more relaxed, softer look to them, they're perfect for cottage gardens. And it's probably why I grow so many of them. Now, actually, I grow so many of them because I fell in love with David Austin's roses 25 years ago. And I got one on a bargain rack at like Home Depot or Lowe's, and it did so well here. Whereas the roses that I grew in the valley didn't perform well here. And so finding one that did really well for me was the ticket to me adding many more to my garden. So yeah, I just find these super simple. And there's all kinds of shrub roses, not just the David Austin roses. There's Cortez roses, there's French bread roses. There's just a wide array of them. So one of my favorites, absolute favorites, climbing roses. You see, this is Quicksilver. It's an arbor rose variety. I have found all the arbor rose climbing roses to be fantastic performers in my garden. And then over here is Gertrude Jekyll. This is a David Austin variety. I bought it. Well, I love the bright pink, but the scent. The scent is phenomenal, and I love having it at nose height as you walk through the garden to enjoy. Climbing roses don't actually climb. You have to tie them in to whatever structure you're going to support them on. They're perfect for arbors, obelisks, trellises, fences, anything. You can even grow them up a single post, which is beautiful too, especially if you have not very much space in your garden. That's a perfect use for them. And that is called pillaring a rose. So yeah, I learned that. I have a blog post on that on my blog, flowerpatchfarmhouse.com. So that goes into that. So some climbers, they bloom once in spring, and that's it, but they bloom beautifully for several weeks. And then there's others that continue to put on blooms as long as you deadhead them. Now, deadheading is just where you cut off, the flowers that are fading or shattering. And like this one will come off soon. Quicksilver, the arbor rose, is the lavender one. That blooms beautifully through the summer on several flushes. So does Gertrude Gico. But you do need to come in and deadhead. There's no particular, you don't have to go back to a 5-leaf, nothing. Just cut the dead flowers off. And if you want to cut back for a little tidiness to a leaf node, then go ahead. But there is no one way to do it. And for extra flowering, or make sure you get plenty of flowers, try to train them in 45-degree angles, because then that's when the laterals throw up. And then they always bloom on the tip of one of those. So if everything's going straight up, then you'll get all the flowers on top and not get as many below. So just keep in mind, try to angle the main canes into 45 degrees. That's what this one, the arbor rose quicksilver, is actually over on that side of the arbor, but I have the cane trained this way to get more blooms. So that is just a little tip there to get lots. Now, like I said, arbor rose varieties have been very tough and prolific and just super fast growers in my garden. But other climbers are beautiful. Now, many David Austin roses, they're not true climbers. What I mean is, in the US, they throw out, the shrubs even throw out long canes, many of them, and then you can train them. That's the Gertrude Gico, the Tess of the D'Aubervilles. All of those are just their shrub roses that here throw super long canes, and then you can grow them as climbers instead of a shrub. If you cut them down short, they will stay a shrub. So very versatile, those. I'm sorry if I bumped that. So how do you use climbing roses? Well, if you cover pergolas, you can create garden rooms by having the roses climb over them. It can help provide shade, because many of the vigorous growers will grow 10, 12 feet. And then if you weave them over top of a pergola, or even when I walk through this arbor in the hot overhead time of the day, it provides some shade. I've even thought of adding even more arbors to this rose alley so I can have more roses climbing as you go through and have a real true shade. The only problem I have is on this side of it all, it might provide too much shade for over there, but it's worth a shot. I can always pull them out and replant them if I need to. But yeah, so many uses. You can create an entrance to a garden with it. Yeah, just beautiful. Now, some good companion plants with the roses, I have found clematis work beautifully. There's other climbers too, like there's, foxglove make good companions, because the foxgloves will actually, for me, bloom a little bit earlier, but their tall stature really draws the eye to the climbing roses. Delphiniums are really good, the same thing, the tall stature brings the eye up. And then also Nepeta, I have found Nepeta has worked beautifully with the roses. Now, another one that works well with roses, and many people will try to dispute this, and I'll tell you why, is lavender. In the UK, you will often see lavender planted with the roses. Now, why do some people dispute it? Because of the different watering requirements. But you'd be surprised that lavender, as long as the soil is well draining, they will thrive with your roses. And many times when it's well draining, the water will go deeper for the roses, but then the top dries out a little bit more. And that's where the lavender takes up its water. So you can plant them together successfully. I have. I'll take you to one in a minute, and you can see that I have lavender growing just beautifully with my roses. So right down here is that lavender with the rose. That is my Queen of Sweden, and here's the lavender here, and it's just thriving. This is very well draining soil, and yep, it grows alongside the roses fantastically. So over here, can you see this one? Barely. This is rural England, and this is a rambler. Ramblers typically only bloom the one time in the spring, many of them, but they throw up very long, very flexible canes, so they're easy to train on things. And many times the first bloom with the ramblers is for several weeks. So you get the vigor, you get the lush bloom early in the season, and yeah, and like I said, they're easy to train on arbors, obelisks, trellises because they are very flexible. Many of them are also very thorny. Now this rural England is a rambler, but it's a repeat blooming rambler, and I absolutely love it. You can see a clematis over here that is trained on this arbor with it. This is Arabella, and it blooms constantly too. It's one of those clematis that blooms through the summer. I have ones in the front, they only bloom basically in the spring and then again in the fall, and then there's the ones that continually bloom. So also grow a variety of clematis. Perfect. But yeah, ramblers are, I've included them many. There's many older ramblers, very heavily perfumed. I have one that I absolutely have to have in my garden. It's called Albertine, and it is super vigorous grower, and it does bloom so beautifully in the spring. It's worth a spot in my garden, even though it only blooms that one time. Now, one thing you need to know about pruning ramblers is they bloom on old wood typically. Therefore, you want to just go ahead and deadhead at the end of the spring bloom, and then cut out what you don't want, because sometimes they can really put on too much canes. And then leave them alone. Don't do any more cutting because, as I said, they bloom on old wood. So next year you don't want to limit your bloom. Now I have to share with you a rose that I'm absolutely in love with. This one, this is Pretty in Pink Eden, and just absolutely gorgeous. I planted it with my Zephyrin because many times my Zephyrin at this time of year doesn't bloom as prolifically as it does in the spring, and I wanted to add another bloom on here. And I am loving this rose. So Pretty in Pink Eden. So I have to just share this one. This in here is Florentina. And it is just, I just planted this last spring. And then there's more flowers over here. I'm training it along this area. Then I have these two huge canes that came up here. I think I'm going to put an obelisk here to train it around because it is just going bonkers everywhere. And I am loving that color. My Colette rose, isn't it just gorgeous? It's doing better this year than it ever has. So anyways, next up, hybrid tea roses. Now hybrid teas are many times what people think of when they think roses. Hybrid teas can be a little bit fussier and need a little bit different care. Usually hybrid teas are used for cut flowers. And the most advice for pruning roses is meant for hybrid teas, not all roses across the board. And that is because they were made for show, or they were grown for show and or cutting. And by using those things like cut down to a 5-leaf node, or cut, what do you say, at a certain time, or even, the cutting at an angle on a cane is utter nonsense. It's supposedly supposed to prevent disease. The water doesn't stay on there and it doesn't cause disease. So the most, like I said, pruning advice is meant for hybrid teas, and that was to get the most roses or the biggest roses for show. So hybrid teas are great for formal rose gardens, more formal garden settings, and yeah, for show and or cutting because of this shape. And usually hybrid teas, they have one rose on a long cane at a time instead of a whole cluster of roses. Now for me, hybrid teas don't like my conditions, strange conditions, and maybe it's our cold nights during some of the year. Like I said, I do have one. It might like its be doing well because it likes its place. But other than that, any others I've tried to grow here haven't done well. I do want to try a couple others. I think Mr. Lincoln is a hybrid tea, and I want to try it. It was the very first rose 40 years ago when I got married and had a home of my own that I bought for myself. And it's always kind of held a special place in my heart. But I've not tried to grow it here. Yeah, let's go on to Floribunda roses. They're great for continuous color, mass plantings, borders, smaller spaces. You know, they bloom in large clusters rather than single flowers, and they're known for putting on a long-lasting, colorful display throughout your growing season. They help bridge the gap between hybrid teas and shrub roses. And the use for these floribundas is along pathways, in repeated groupings, smaller gardens, and in formal or formal settings. They bloom heavily and they create a really strong visual impact. So plant them in groups of 3 or more for the most dramatic effect. Ground cover roses. They work great on slopes, borders, low maintenance landscapes, and even erosion control. You know, ground covers, they stay low and spread outward rather than upward, and many are incredibly tough and bloom for months. This one here is a variety I absolutely love, and it's called Baby Blanket. And it stays shorter, and it will throw out canes. This one is the fairy, but yeah, so this one will spread out and just be beautiful and low growing as a ground cover. I'll share another one with you. Now this one is apple blossom. You notice how I have it up on that obelisk a little bit, but if that cane was laying down, it would be covering on the ground. And I may move a few plants over here, or I may just try to weave it through on the ground and see how it works. I just wanted to be able to see it. It was so pretty. And I love the light coloring. It does need a little bit of deadheading now, but this is apple blossom carpet rose. So just a beautiful specimen I have found that works super well. This just got planted 2 years ago, and it has, maybe not even that, maybe it was last summer. And yeah, just taken off. I love the pastel colors of it too. So one thing about it too, being they grow so lushly along the ground, they act really as a great weed suppressor. And what a beautiful way to suppress leaves. So they need very little pruning. I just deadhead lightly. They're very disease resistant. They bloom repeatedly, almost nonstop for me, and require less maintenance than most traditional roses. So I'm in the camera. Yeah, this is a ground cover rose, and it really would cover the ground. But I have it on this obelisk that we built. I don't think we have a video on this one, but we do have it on the blog post, in a blog post on my website. And yeah, this thing, wherever these canes, which they're throwing up 6-7 foot canes, when they get on the ground, wherever they touch the ground, they root, and they will smother a hillside. Very tough. The deer, for some reason, this is right on the corner of 2 streets. I have forest right here. They don't touch them. I don't know why, but yeah, I have most of the blooms this year up on top and less down here. And that's because I didn't prune it last year properly. So, but this is a perfect one. This is white or Alba Meadland. And yeah, it's like somebody threw popcorn on here, and they got a little hint of pink as they age. They come out pure white, and then they take on a little pink tinge, and it's beautiful. Even when they start to fade, they are still quite lovely. But you keep this deadheaded, and it is just a mass of white blooms all summer long. My Eden rose. Everybody should have an Eden rose. Do you see the clematis back through here? But yeah, this Eden, it blooms through the summer so gorgeously. I think it has some new blooms. I'll take you to see the newer blooms, which are so pretty. The only downside with this is it doesn't have any scent, but just grows beautifully, and paired with the clematis, just supreme. This is the front entrance to my house. I always have loved this. In fact, the one on the other side of this arbor, I started from a cutting. It seems to be very easy to start from cuttings. So if you're new at starting cuttings, try an Eden. Once you have success, then you're willing to try and try again. Some roses are tougher to start from cuttings than others. So just know that if you fail, it might be the rose and not you and what you're doing. I do have a new video out on one way that I have found extremely successful of rooting rose cuttings. And it's really super easy because you don't have to guess at how much water to give it. Because that's one question with my old video on starting roses from cuttings is how much do you water? And that depends upon your climate conditions. There's so many variables, there's no one set way. But the new way I shared with you, you don't have to worry about that. So aren't these gorgeous? These are the new blooms of the Eden, and they just are producing so beautifully right now. I got a few fading, so the sooner I cut them off, the sooner it will produce even more blooms. So miniature roses. Miniature roses are exactly that. Real roses in miniature form. Now, what are they good for? They're great for containers. They're great for borders. I have mine out in an area that's a little bit raised, so they're higher up for visibility because I love them. Those are my sun blaze roses. Many miniature roses prefer like afternoon shade to do their best, especially in hot regions. So yeah, they're great for, like I said, containers, patios, things like that where you can have them up close to you. So many colors. You could even grow those little ones you get at the grocery store. All those are miniature roses in a little 4-inch pot. You plant those in a bigger container or even out in the garden, they will get larger, not as big as a standard rose, or traditional rose, but they will. Just give it the right conditions. They still take the same care as most other roses. The ones I've had didn't really get fungal problems, but if you live in a high humidity area, then there are things you could do. I have a video on milk spray where I used milk. You can use buttermilk to combat powdery mildew, and it does work very well. So another type of rose we should never leave out is old garden roses. I have a thing for vintage roses. Now, sometimes they are more susceptible to fungal diseases and other. That's why the modern hybrids have been created, was to go past that. But sometimes the old garden roses are just tougher than nails and will put up with a whole lot more abuse than many of the newer varieties. Though, as I said, many of the newer varieties are bred to be tough. But they usually people love the old roses, vintage roses, etc., because of the scent. They usually are super scented beautifully, and if they're restoring like a historic garden, there's certain varieties that many people desire. Now, I started getting them years and years ago from Antique Rose Emporium. I still think they carry a lot of them. There's also a garden here in the San Jose, I think San Jose is called Vintage Garden Roses. And so you can find them many times. Now, there's many that have been lost to commerce, and I know Florette, Erin on Florette's, she had found a garden that the gal passed away or something, and her extensive collection of vintage roses was not going to be taken care of. So they had took cuttings and roses and whatever, and are going to keep those ones available. And so I just thought that was fantastic. I loved reading about that. There used to be, at the Sacramento Cemetery, all these old roses that grew through there. And so when they were removing them, there was a vintage rose people that loved them and went in and saved a bunch. Now, I'm not sure exactly where, I know they moved them, but I haven't got to visit where. So yeah, never discount vintage roses. As I said, sometimes a little bit more care, like with spraying, etc., to prevent powdery mildew, etc., but sometimes they are worth a spot in your garden. So another rose that I absolutely love growing, but they are on the pricier side, is standards or tree roses. Now, they're great for lining pathways. Where did we, I was at Hearst Castle, and they had them lining the pathway. And they're great for containers because then you can move, like I have to move them under protection in the winter because of our heavy snows, which could break off the rose at the graft point. Now, tree roses are not a specific variety unto themselves, meaning they are regular roses that have been grafted onto a trunk. And so the top is where the graft is, and you can see where the little knobs of where the graft has been done. So if that whole thing snapped, you wouldn't have a rose anymore. So they do take a little extra winter care. Many times you really want to protect that graft so it doesn't get froze through and destroyed. I have to protect it from heavy snows getting snapped. This last year we didn't get any snow, and then I thought it was safe, and yeah, a couple of mine, the stem bent, so I'm propping them up, but they're perfect. Like if you have a little seeding area that has an entrance to it, 2 tree roses in a big pots make like an entryway that's beautiful. You can plant plants down in the base with them to drape, and just makes beautiful a focal point. If you have like an end of a path that has an arbor, you could put it in the center, and yeah, makes a beautiful thing. Now, like I said, a little more maintenance just because they have to be protected in winter, and depending on the variety, whatever it takes. Like the ones I have out back are like miniature, and very heavily scented. I had never heard of that variety before I bought it. And then others I've seen, I have an iceberg tree rose. Let's go see that one. So this is my iceberg tree rose, and you see right here it's pretty knobby, and that's where the graft is. This one is not only the white iceberg, but also the burgundy. So you can see, well, I don't know if you can see it, the red flower. Oh, over here. So over here is one of the red flowers, but it looks like this one needs to be watered. So I need to get out here and do that. But yeah, these are perfect. I bought this one bare root, and I have a video of me planting in this very pot that it's been in for several years. And so that they do beautifully in containers. And like I move this around, it goes underneath the eave of the porch, therefore it doesn't get broken in the winter. So yeah, I've seen these big and bushy. Mine don't ever get that way, probably because of our weird springs and all of that. But yeah, others can get them even more beautiful than this. There's one more rose. It's called a grandiflora. And Floribundas and grandifloras are similar, and I'll read you the difference. And it's Floribundas are compact and produce large clusters of smaller blooms, making them ideal for garden borders. Grandifloras are taller and feature fewer but much larger classic hybrid tea style blooms clustered on long stems. So it's the difference between them is their size and their blooming habits. So both of them are beautiful roses. So landscape use for grandifloras is they function as a structural anchor or vertical focal point in the back of the garden, and the longer stems make them highly suitable for cut flowers like the hybrid teas. So they're developed by crossing a Floribunda and a hybrid tea rose. So it has kind of the features of both of them. So yeah, if you were wondering, difference between Floribundas and grandifloras. So remember, grandifloras, grand, big, put at the back of the garden border as a good placement for them. All right, the one I left out, now my brain's not working right now, so I'm gonna read my notes. And these are the polyantha roses. They're compact, bushy roses. They produce large clusters of small to medium-sized flowers throughout the growing season. So they continuously seem to be in bloom. Then they were introduced in the late 1800s. They're prized for their exceptional flower power, disease resistance, and easy care. They grow between 2 and 4 feet tall, so they're great for a border, cottage gardens, mass plantings, and even in containers, which is great for those who have small space. I've been getting attacked by mosquitoes. So that's a lot of the roses. If I missed one, please let me know. Like I said, I have made this video 4 times, and I seem to somehow not like the result. But okay, so let's talk about which roses grow best in different climates. I think that's what a lot of people wanted from this video. So cold climates, which are USDA zones 3 through 5, choose roses known for exceptional winter hardiness. There's ones called Griffith roses. There's also Canadian roses. You can look up, and usually sites selling roses will list whether or not they're good in colder climates. So good choices. There's many shrub roses, old garden roses, I mentioned Canadian bread roses and rugosa roses. These will tolerate freezing temperatures with minimal winter protection. And then temperate climates, which are zones 6 through 7. Almost every class of rose can be grown successfully here. Gardeners have the widest range of choice from hybrid teas to English roses and climbers. Now I know some in lower zones, what they will do is what they call healing in of roses, or they bury them partially for the winter. They'll lay them over, and or they'll put cages around them, pack them with leaves. They'll prune them down a little bit, pack the cage with leaves and other protective things, and that helps against the extreme cold. So I've not had to do it, so I can't give you advice on how to do that. I've just read about it. So just know that if you look that up, I'm sure you'll find somebody who's had to do that and shares with you. Okay, so zones 8 through 10, hot, dry climates. Now, not all those zones are hot and dry, just so you know. Some are hot and humid. Northern California is usually hot and dry, many areas. Now, I live in the mountains. We are not extremely hot, no matter what, and we get cool nights. So, and I'm a zone 8B, and that's just to let you know that not all zones are equal as far as conditions. Many roses do thrive in these zones because they love sunshine. As I mentioned previously, hybrid teas don't do well for me because of our precocious springs of being cold and then hot and then cold. Yeah, they don't like it, and they hate the cold nights of our spring, even if the days get warm. So you need to choose roses in hotter climates that have tolerate high summer temperatures, intense sunlight, and lower humidity. Morning sun with irrigation at the soil level helps produce healthy plants while reducing disease. Mulching also helps keep roots cooler during heat waves. Also, I have a video on ground covers that I use in place of mulch, and yes, I use them under my roses. I don't let them, sometimes it does encroach upon the trunk, meaning it grows over close to it, and I just pull them away a little bit. It's not a big deal, but you just don't want to, you want to make sure there's no fungus or encouraging things to invade there near the trunk of the base of your rose. So hot and humid climates. Humidity, it changes everything, as you in the South well know. Warm, moist air creates ideal conditions for fungal diseases such as black spot and powdery mildew. Look for modern roses specifically bred for disease resistance, and there's quite a few out there, but it doesn't mean resistance, doesn't mean proof. They're not disease proof, including many shrub roses and newer Floribundas. Something to look for on roses: the roses with shiny leaves are more disease resistant than those with a matte sheen on the leaves. So good air circulation and proper spacing becomes important in high humidity areas. I can plant closer together because we do have arid conditions. So now here's another thing I wanted to talk about: own root versus grafted roses. This is important. Whether roses grows on its own rootstock or onto root stock, which rootstock is from another rose that some consider superior in helping a rose to be bigger faster. And a lot of times you'll find larger roses that you buy are grafted. Now, own root roses grow from their own root system. Like I've showed you how to root roses, rose cuttings. That when it roots and I plant it, that's an own root rose. It is not ever grafted onto another rootstock. Grafted roses are two plants joined together. This is reputed to have faster establishment. Often larger plants at purchase can perform well in soils depending on rootstock. I don't have those issues. I found that own root works better for me because if we get one of those late freezes or even a super early freeze, and sometimes a rose can be killed to the ground and you think, oh no, I've lost my rose, it will come back from its root. If it had been grafted and it dies down to the ground, the rose that comes back will be the rootstock rose and not the rose you purchased. So that's the difference between the two. I have found that own root roses grow just as good for me as grafted roses. And I prefer them, their own root, because one year we had one of those freak freezes. I lost 70 roses. That they were David Austin's and they were grafted roses, so they were gone. So from then on, I look for and primarily purchase own root roses. So, choosing the right rose for your garden. Before purchasing any rose, consider your hardiness zone, of course, and then how much sunlight your garden receives. That can play a big part in how well a rose does. The summer temperatures and humidity, whether you want fragrance, cut flowers, climbing growth, or low maintenance. The mature size of the plant where you're putting it. Disease resistance ratings. The healthiest, happiest roses are usually the ones best adapted to your conditions, not just your zone. And it's not usually the most expensive or the newest varieties that fit that bill. So the single best type of rose is the one that thrives in your climate and conditions. So if you enjoy cutting flowers, then hybrid tea roses may be your cup of tea, or grandifloras. They also can have the same attributes. Now, I will say there are some roses that are beautiful, but when you cut them, they fall apart overnight. There are roses that will stay in a vase, cut soon enough, for 7 days and be beautiful. So many times at rose purchasing sites online, it will tell you if it will maintain or keep together in a vase for several days, or if it's one that just falls apart. Many of my David Austin roses just fall apart, but there are some, like I bought a Juliet, which is actually a high maintenance rose because it was meant for florists, and meaning it was meant to be grown in greenhouses, pampered to death, so that you got the blooms perfect, etc. So it is one I have to spray with milk to prevent fungus, and yeah, it scorches easy in the hot sun, but I wanted to try it. Everybody raved over it. It is very beautiful. Would I say it is absolutely worth all the extra work? If I wasn't a person that loved working in my garden and loved working with gardens, I would say no. So if you just want an easy to maintain rose, then look for those. Okay. If you want season-long color with little maintenance, shrub roses, Floribunda roses are a good choice. If you go to sites like Heirloom Roses, well, it used to be called Heirloom Roses. Now it's just called Heirloom because I guess they're selling other plants too. But you'll just type in, there's a filter, and you can type in, on the side, hit a filter for Floribunda roses, and you'll see all the different Floribunda roses. Earth Angel, Ebb Tide. I was trying to look at all the ones I have that are Floribundas, and I have quite a few that and their own root roses. So yeah, these have been very low maintenance. If you want cottage garden overflowing with fragrant blooms, old garden roses, English roses, and there's other roses that are just as heavily scented as the English roses. So don't think that just the English roses have those attributes. So take the time to match the rose to your growing conditions, but never be afraid to experiment. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I filled in where I missed, and I will see you next time with my next video. I need to do another garden hacks video. I did one last year, and there's been things I've been doing that I've been writing down thinking, okay, this would make a good one that people want to know about. Or it's things you've asked about, like this. I have this sitting here. This is what I use to spray for the gophers, and you've asked about how I do that. That's coming up too. So yeah, I've got to get working on that. I will see you next time.